Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from January 2nd from The Federalist. And it's about Rome because how often do I think about Rome? Well, considering I'm reading a book about the Byzantine Empire right now, and if you know anything about it, it's just the Eastern Roman Empire. It's another name for it. So how often do I think about Rome? It's literally every day at this point. So it says the article title is We Should Think About Rome, but Not for Her Glories. And I thought this would be interesting because it says there is much we can learn by studying Rome's descent into oblivion because it kind of has to do with us here in the United States. So let's just dive right in and see what we got to do here. See what it says. Is the year in a word, according to December 22nd Financial Times article, is the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire also happened to tie into one of the year's top social media trends, according to the New York Times. That's pretty impressive, given it was only in September that people the world over were suddenly fascinated, perplexed, and amused by how often men think about it. Says more than 1 billion people viewed a TikTok video encouraging women to ask the men in their lives how often they think about the subject. 3 times a day, one answers one man to his fiancee at one viral video. In another, a woman's father explains that using the commode, there you go, provokes thoughts of how the Romans invented the modern day sewage system, which, yes, they kind of did. Well, it says, granted, there's plenty to commend a political entity that lasted 1,000 years, says which at its height controlled an empire spanning 3 continents and crafted technological advances that still amaze modern man. And by the way, it wasn't just 1,000 years; it was more like, if we're talking just the empire, it was actually almost 1,500. So there you go. Says, and yet, truth be told, the society from which that empire issued was already showing signs of decrepitude during the life of Christ, a century before the empire reached its greatest extent during the reign of Trajan. Rome's greatest victories, in some respects, precipitated and accelerated its downfall. As such, they serve as a cautionary tale for those seeking to identify the traits of a thriving civilization. There's early signs of imperial problems. As the story typically goes, Rome propelled herself onto the world stage via strict adherence to republican virtue and civic piety, and not capital R Republican, like Republicans and Democrats, like lowercase r, as you see here. As in 3 wars with the Carthaginians, the Republic proved her mettle, courageously suffering catastrophic losses, including approximately 50,000 in a single day at Cannae, but ultimately triumphed. Yeah, it's a definition of a Pyrrhic victory if I've ever seen one. Said, and go read about that battle. It's pretty fascinating as well. So it's just over a century after the end of the Third Punic War in 146 BC, and that's where the salt of the earth comes from, is that because Carthage basically ceased to exist in that form at that time because Rome just annihilated them. Says Rome exerted total dominance over the entire Mediterranean and made significant incursions into Gaul, Central Europe, and Asia Minor. Says, and yet, the very same expansion that occurred as Rome transitioned from a republic to an empire acted to obscure the virtue cementing her success. Originally a cultural backwater of the Mediterranean world, conquest brought her into communication with a rich diversity of ideas, beliefs, and practices that undermined her rigid family focused principles. 20th century's French scholar and member of the Académie Française, Henri Daniel Rops, and I butchered that name, I know I did, because I don't do French accents very well at all, explains in the first volume of his History of the Church of Christ, says her conquest led Rome into a kind of spiritual no man's land. Her intake of spiritual ideas, all those things which form the very basis of a civilization, its interpretation of life, the conception of which it has of itself, came less and less from her own ancient loyalties. As they became more cultured and civilized, the Romans deviated more and more from the ideal picture of their race that they had held in bygone days, regarding it now as uncouth and old fashioned. Says even in the earliest days of the empire, Roman society was already descending into hedonism and backstabbing intrigue. The poet Sextus Propertius called the vacation city of Baiae, frequented by indulgent, conspiring Roman elites, a den of licentiousness and vice. The Emperor Augustus, the first one, by the way, instituted laws, the Leges Juliae, to combat the scourges of adultery and divorce, though with little effect. Well, he tried. Says of late years, wealth has made us greedy, and self-indulgence has brought us through every form of sensual excess to be, if I may so put it, in love with death, both individual and collective, observed ancient Roman historian Livy and in his History of Rome. Says the unexpected curses of an empire. Says the same Roman generals who expanded the empire into Europe, Asia, and Africa returned to Rome with astronomical amounts of gold. Tributes levied on eastern provinces alone amounted to annual deliveries of 90 million gold sovereigns. Well, I don't know how much that is, even though I've read about this period a lot. I should say I don't remember how much it is, but 90 million gold somethings is a lot of anything. This is in an era when capital possessed few outlets for investment, Owing to the lack of a large scale industry, gold merely enabled the common people to stop working and the idle rich to spend riotously on dwelling houses, food and drink, and material pleasures of all kinds, writes the French guy whose name I don't want to butcher again. Says, imagine if an entire society won the lottery. Well, that would be fun. Says, actually, you don't even need to imagine. The citizens of the exorbitantly wealthy and decadent Gulf state of Qatar, which has made a fortune off oil and gas, enjoy tax free incomes, high paying government jobs, free healthcare, free higher education, financial support for newlyweds, housing support, subsidies that cover utility bills, and flush retirement benefits. Well, wow, good for them. His Roman wealth was based not on industrial enterprise benefiting the entire social structure, but on a monopoly of gold and land. Wealth was concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. At one point, half of Roman Africa belonged to 6 men. There arose a small class of extremely wealthy individuals intimately connected with the government and separated by a vast financial gulf from the inferior strata of society. And the Emperor Augustus, I believe he actually owned Egypt, so figure that one out. And Egypt, of course, wasn't at that point. It was just a province of Rome. It wasn't like a like we know it now, like its own separate country with its own separate everything. It was just it belonged to Rome, and he owned it. So just imagine that today, like someone owning a country. I don't mean like in the figurative sense or anything like that. I mean like in a quite literal. It was his fiefdom to do with what he wanted. It was basically like his backyard, if you will. Like that's his. He owns that. So yes, he was stupid rich. There's a serious lack of balance existed between a small, pleasure-loving aristocracy and the enormous mass of the people, which only received the crumbs of all those benefits of Roman civilization, explains French guy. His military conquest also brought slaves to Rome in unprecedented numbers, sometimes as much as 150,000 in a single campaign. French guy writes, during Augustus's reign, slaves accounted for more than one-third of the population of Rome, and Alexandria possibly two-thirds. Consequently, manual labor was no longer performed by the once idealized citizen farmer such as Cincinnatus, but by a massive underclass of imported slaves. And go read about Cincinnatus if you don't know anything about that dude. Trust me, I'm not going to spoil it here, but go read about him. The cities, in turn, overflowed with unemployed and uprooted peasants, skilled workmen, and visiting foreigners, all of whom were parasitic clients paid for. All of whom were parasitic clients paid for their doubtful loyalty by bread and diverted by the circus. Okay, I thought I said that wrong for some reason. Anyway, I can read says the addictive tendencies of indolence and ceaseless entertainment discouraged the once fecund Romans out from family life and birth rates plummeted. By the beginning of the second century, not a second century, was there like another one? Says by the beginning of the second century AD, to have even 3 children was quite exceptional. Wow, this is kind of really turning into like it sounds kind of like us here. It says men of means could shirk marriage and its obligations since, as bachelors with female slaves, they possessed bed companions who could be exchanged as they pleased. And if these consorts became pregnant, abortion and exposure of newborn infants, i.e., wanton abandonment, were easy options. As being Rome may not be a good thing. Periodic attempts by the state to curb Rome's suicidal tendencies, such as Augustus's Leges Juliae, which offered benefits to those who married and had at least 3 male offspring, had little effect. The Alimenta, a welfare program introduced in the late 1st century AD, seems to have had a similar aims, but, like the efforts of Augustus, failed to encourage a significant bump in procreation. A nation is indeed sick at heart if, in order to live decently and to produce children, it needs a series of subsidies and rules to enable it to do so, argues Mr. French guy again. Says a widening uneven distribution of wealth, the evisceration of an independent middle class, and importation of a burgeoning servile class, the infantilization of the elites via luxury and mindless entertainment, and the vitiation, I've never seen that word before, of the family for the sake of freedom and pleasure, these were the unintended fruits of the Roman Imperium. As many scholars and pundits observe, such trends are also visible in a contemporary America that is experiencing rising inequality, widespread exploitation of immigrants for cheap labor, a culture of constant amusement, and the abandonment of the family in the name of autonomy, self-fulfillment, and financial security. This weird dinks. What does that stand for again? Oh, double income, no kids. Yeah. Says we go to Trader Joe's and workout classes on the weekends, says a woman in a recent video that epitomizes an America suffering the lowest birth rates in its history. However, many America is new, the Imperium is as much a cautionary tale as it is an ancient marvel. Concurrent with some of its most memorable or remarkable, I'm sorry, achievements, Rome is already steadily decaying within. It's fast forwarding pretty quickly. Thanks, Joe Biden. As even while it continued accumulating territories, its citizens were growing ever weaker and incapable of self government. The armies it used to expand and defend its borders became less Roman, and as a result, less allegiant to the citizens they swore to defend. Kind of like what they're trying to get now, which is saying illegal immigrants should be able to serve in our army. And if you know anything about Roman history, that's what happened is that they kept like they would absorb essentially folks that were like Germans or what they called Germans. They weren't like Germans as we know now, but they absorbed Germans in their army, and their army steadily became something that wasn't Roman, so they had no real loyalty to Rome. So kind of starting to mirror what we're seeing now. Says it was, after all, a Roman mercenary army that sacked the Eternal City in 410 AD. That is correct. The individuals, however, well intentioned to renew those ancient Roman mores typically fell flat. States have always shown themselves completely incapable of restoring their moral foundations once they have allowed them to weaken, French guy opined. If so, it would be good to reflect on Rome, but perhaps less so for her glories than for what lessons we may learn from her descent into oblivion. So I know, yeah, there's a lot of people out there that try to say, like, what period of history mirrors what we're going through now. And obviously, Rome seems to be like where everybody goes for the first time. But, you can also say the French Revolution, stuff like that. There's other similarities to make, but I think this kind of shows a lot of parallels. So what do you guys think about this? Let me know in the comments below. Do you think that we're more like Rome? Is there another uh, area of history that you think is could be comparable to the United States and what's going on now? Let me know in those comments below. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.